Hey, okay. So we're back at this again, and if you remember from yesterday's recording, we had deployed the cluster on EKS. Then we've also had deployed the application Wazuh. We could just run a few checks just to be sure everything looks good. We will check our pods, and as you can see, all our pods are still running. So it means we're still right at it. We can go over to a browser and refresh this just to be sure Wazuh is still running. And as you can see, we can still access Wazuh on the dashboard. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, a bit of technicality. Like remember, did mention that we will be maturing our deployments to look like what the classical CM will look like by having a bunch of integrations so we can actually fetch logs and also pre-process or process logs and have all that going on in the background for us. So today we will start that process. I did mention from the start that we will have a bunch of integrations, but mind you, I may not be able to have time to record all of them. The steps are usually similar, so I might record one or two just to show you the areas that you need to change or where you need to make the mappings or the config change, the specific setting type, and to be sure you have it running once you have the integration pushed into the application via your config change. So today we will start the process, and I'll try not to keep this too long. We will first of all set up our environment, bring in our credentials into the Wazuh, the AWS credentials to start with, because remember we'll be deploying an agent on the cloud environment, so we need the cluster need to be able to communicate to the agents back and forth behind the network. Besides the networking aspect, if we want to execute certain commands or instructions on the agent from the master, we need a way the master should be able to communicate to the agent, not just the networking. So next, then we will create some integrations we'll do for a backup. I think today we might just do the backup one. And after the backup, maybe we'll bring in all our integration files. Then the next recording, we will start to map those integration files in the customization space, then also in the master conf area where we'll make those changes. Now, remember, mind you, there will be three different locations we'll be making these changes. So it's important that we have that done correctly. It's important that we have the LinkedIn done correctly as well before we push this change over to the application. All right, enough with the ranting. Let's get into the business. Great. So as you can see, we have Wazuh here. We've got our creds, our certs. Then also we've got, excuse me, we've also got the index.stack. Then we've got this file called secrets. In secrets, remember that's where we have all our passwords. The first thing we will do is we'll bring in our AWS access and secret access keys encoded with base64 into the secrets. So with that credentials, once we start having integrations, the application should know how to connect to those resources using the credentials which you're going to be storing in here. So the first folder we will create, we'll bring in a folder here. We'll just call it AWS. So in this folder, we're going to create two files. The first one we will create, we will call it our config. Then the second file we will going to create in the same folder, we will call it our credentials. Okay, so as usual, we're going to bring in what we know. Excuse me. We're going to bring in, I think I need water, what we know as our AWS creds into this folder with the config and the credentials. Or an alternative, I think we can just remove this folder. Let's do something else. I'm just thinking out loud. Removing this folder. Then I'm going to delete this file. I'm going to delete this file also. Okay, great. So I don't want the folder as well. So I'm just going to remove the folder. So what I'm going to do is I'll just create a file in the secret folder. Then I'll call the file name AWS Threads. Okay, this will be a YAML file. Great. So I'm going to bring in the credentials. Remember, this is actually Kubernetes, so we must be sure we have the mapping done correctly, and this mapping will be using for the credentials. I'm just going to copy and paste it. I pretty much have it somewhere, so to make it easy for me without having to type it. So I'm going to explain what it does basically. As you can see, what this does is it gives Wazuh the right keys to be able to communicate to the resources which will be communicating within the cloud environment or maybe any other external cloud environment, just as much as we have the right access permissions for the policy configured for these credentials. So this is actually AWS Wazuh credentials. Excuse me. We have the access key encoded in base 64, and if you're wondering how this works, I actually encoded and passed it over to using SSL base 64, so you can see. I use Echo to actually put it into the pipeline, also just encode it using base 64 for SSL. If you have SSL, or if you don't, you can actually use any other base 64 encoder you have. Great. So this is the first thing we want to do. Now, after this, at some point we'll be bringing in credentials for Jira as well. We're bringing in credentials for maybe any other integration that is external that we need Wazuh to be able to communicate to that environment. It could be Opsgene, it could be anything. We will bring in other credentials so that we store them here. And once we push this, at least the master knows how to fetch those credentials and use to authenticate to those services to actually get the logs shipped back into Wazuh for processing. Okay, so that's it for the secret. Now we've got this. The next we're going to do is we're going to go into the manager folders. And within the manager folder, you can see we've got this manager conf. But before that, we will create our AWS folder in here where we'll pass our AWS credentials. So I'm going to create a new folder here. And I'll call this AWS. Now in this folder, I'm going to have to put in my config and my credentials file. Is it as it is on my local environment? So we'll call this config. Then we'll create another file. We'll call this credentials. So to start with the config, if you cut the content of your config, it's going to look like this. I'm using the default profile. If you've got or the specific profile you're working with, be sure you have that profile configured. Then oh sorry, this should be in the config. My bad. Yeah, I think I need to get water. Then we'll do the same for the credentials. So we will copy the credentials and pass that in here as well. So you can see the access key, the secret key. Again, I'm going to destroy these things before I actually post these videos on YouTube. Then we can see the region also specified in there. Okay, now if we've got that done, we can move ahead to the next stage. So the first thing which we're going to do in this first recording, we're just going to configure backup. The backup in this context, we want to be sure that while we backs up every day, the backup will be for the logs. Remember, anything could go wrong, is something could crash. But if you have your backup, maybe been exported to an S3 bucket somewhere, you can just fetch those logs and actually do a recover. I also have a recover script, but we will start with the backup, set up the backup first. Then maybe we might do the recover just in case we don't want human intervention. If it crashes, we want the recover scripts to just trigger. And once we have the cluster back, pushing all the logs from the storage where we have it outside back into the WAS so we can see actually a security incident within our dashboard. Okay, so we're going to create another folder, and this folder we're going to call it backup, still within the manager. So let's call this backup. Now for the backup, we will have some scripts, Python scripts. We will have a script for the daily backup, like I mentioned. We'll also have a script for the monthly backup. Both of them, excuse me, both of them will be doing backups. And I'm going to walk you through the scripts. So in this, I'm going to paste the first scripts so you can see the daily backup. Let's bring in the second one, then we'll walk you through both of them. So we'll bring in the monthly backup as well. I will be glad to share the repo where I have all these in case you want to use this. Feel free to use it without hassle. Okay, I'm also going to bring in the recovery scripts just so once we start doing the mapping, I won't have to bother bringing it in again. So I'll bring in the recovery scripts. So you can see I've got a recovery, I've got a backup, I've got daily for daily, then also for monthly. Let's quickly run through these Python scripts. So I'm bringing in a bunch of libraries, sys, Boto 3, again, Boto 3 for the AWS thing, got the blob, then also got the date time as well as the date time for specific time delta. So you would look at the scripts, we're simply pretty much saying for the particular this day, that we extract the string from the date time, which we've actually imported. Then we pretty much put in the content of the var osec logs. Remember, Wazuh logs are stored in var osec logs, and we want the alerts. We could get the logs, but we just want the alerts. I'm going to show you. Let's see, we can actually log into the master, so we can actually see this directory within the master, just so you understand what this is actually referring to. Just give me a second. I'm going to connect to master. Just grab this, and we're going to go back to our backup. So we're going to paste this. What's wrong with my... Okay, so we're going to connect to the master. Now we're in the master. Then if we go to var osec logs, you will see that we've got the alerts folder, which is what we want to fetch. Now we could fetch the logs, but we don't need that. If I go into the alerts, you will see it's actually aggregated the um, dates. So you see for 2023, which was when this deployed, we start having those compressed logs into that folder. Just a second, please. Something to work. Okay, so you would see we've got the alert JSON. We can actually cut the content of alert JSON. We can pipe this over to JQ. Oh, okay. I don't want to bring in anything in here. I can just cut the contents. We will see the alerts that we have already. So, but if I go, this is actually for today. If I go into the folder 2023, you will see that I've got the backup for October. Oh, my bad. Yes, so we've compressed from the previous date, 19th. Today's current date is 20th, so it's currently writing into those folders, log file, sorry. Okay, we're just going to go back, and great. So now we've seen that we've got those alerts. We want to be able to extract these alerts. That's why you see we're passing this location here. We want to print out the content of PWD on that particular folder containing alerts. Then we want to now use Glob to actually do a bit of clean on the file, specifically extract the alerts. Then we want to also definitely will configure a local rule which would let us know, let Wazuh, sorry, know how that alerting should be done once the backup is done. Then we are shipping it over to an S3 bucket. We're going to create an S3 bucket in the same account called Wazuh Backup Prod. That bucket has to be there. So it's going to be using the credentials which we had configured for AWS to actually write the backup into those buckets. So we've got a bunch of try if something, maybe something happens, try catch accept, and that's just it. The same thing happens for the monthly. The only difference is just in the time structuring that we're specifying for month and for, excuse me, daily. But for the monthly, we seem to be backing up a bit more than just what we backed up from the daily. So we can actually have the complete everything in let's see, go a step back, pretty much everything in here. Just in case something goes wrong, we can still have everything secure. So that's the scripts. Now the first part of this is done. We've got these scripts. Next, we need to be sure that we are mapping this both in the master as well as in the customization. If not, it's just going to be useless. It's just going to be there doing nothing. So let's get that done. Once we have that done, then we'll push this change. We should be able to start seeing some alerts. Maybe errors to start with because we haven't really created the buckets, but we will create a bucket and we will configure this to actually push over to those buckets. Let's get in the second phase of this. Next, we're going to bring in Woodle. Now, the Woodle is what Wazuh used to maybe execute or run most of these scripts that we're actually configuring. So before we go ahead and configure the backup and the master file, that's the master.conf file, we'll bring in our Woodle, which will help us out, which will help Wazuh execute or run most of the scripts. So let's create a folder in the we're going to create a folder in the roots of the Wazuh manager here, and we're going to call this Wazuh. So in the Wazuh, we'll bring in a creative file in here, and we're just going to call this file, my bad, we're going to call this file the AWS S3 Pi. We want Wazuh to actually use this script to connect to the S3 buckets and either put or fetch content from the buckets. Remember, we need to have that script instructing Wazuh what to do exactly. So in this Wazuh, we will create a file. I think I can just copy and paste. Let me just paste. Okay, so this is what the AWS would look like for the AWS S3 Pi. I wouldn't go through it because it's actually a bunch of lines happening in there, but I'm sure if you look at it, you'll be clear enough to understand. I'm saving myself future stress because you can see as part of the definition, there's CloudTrail, there's CloudWatch, there's Guardity, all those integrations are already configured here because what we'll be doing is we'll be extracting those logs, for instance, GuardUT log, CloudTrail log, and any other service on cloud. We won't do the native CloudWatch. We can actually set up a Kinesis to stream those logs straight into Wazuh, or we can actually get those logs streamed to CloudWatch. Then from CloudWatch, export them to an S3 bucket. So Wazuh fetches them from the S3 buckets. Or we can also configure Wazuh to just fetch them from CloudWatch log directly. Whatever option works. I'll be glad to show three of them, but again, with limited time, I might just do the S3 buckets or the Kinesis option, or maybe the CloudTrail option straight up without wasting, the Cloud Watch option without wasting time. Okay, so now we've got this script in here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the master conf and make some useful changes in there. So in the master conf, pretty much this is the master pod, the configuration for the master pod. So you would see some unique config like the ports for connecting to the agent or polling agents, the ports for connect enrolling agents, then also a bit more details around let's see, the domain for or the IP address for the master, so we can actually use that to enroll agents. Then going a bit down, we can see we've got Wazuh. So I need to have Wazuh. If not, again, I might not be able to use Wazuh specifically in this context. Okay, so by default wise, it should have Wazuh actually in it. We've got this one's default configuration. We need to start maturing this. So I'm just going to put a space after here and start adding a few more lines. So we'll start with the backup. Remember, we had brought in the shipping the backup scripts. We need to configure the backup so Wazuh knows how to back things up. We're just gonna give this a name for the comments. Okay, then we'll bring the config. I'm just gonna copy it from my notes pad, Sublime notes into here. So I'm going to walk you through what it does quickly. So if you look at this, we've got one for the monthly and also one for the daily backup. So we're using the Wazuh name command. In Wazuh, you've got Wazuhs. If I go back in here, we definitely would see the folder Wazuhs. In Wazuhs, we've got a bunch of these scripts. We've got the one for AWS I actually brought in mind because a few more changes done to it. So I'm using Wazuh command to just actually run a script, use that script to instruct Wazuh to what to fetch. So we're seeing that we set tag backup daily, then the command, it's going to run this daily backup script. You can see I'm pointing to the path of the daily backup script, var osec backup. Remember, once I run this and push these changes, it's going to create this backup folder in the var osec directory of Wazuh. I'm going to have the daily backup script in there, so I'm instructing it to run the scripts, and the interval is 1 day. Then I'm setting the time when I want it to run this script. The same thing happens for the monthly. It's going to run the monthly script, same path. Then the interval is 1 month. Then I'm setting it the first day of the month. Okay, very, very instructive that you understand how this stuff works. If not, you might end up running into problems. So we have configured the backup in the master, but we are not done yet. I'm just going to put a comment here, close this We're not done yet. Remember, we need to also map this in the customization. If not, it just useless. It won't really make any sense because it will know where the customization for the backup actually is. And if it's not seeing that, although we have this file in the master, we've got the script in the backup, it still won't make sense. So the third thing we're going to do is we don't have to do it in the worker as long as we have it in the master. We're going to go into our customization and create customization for these backup scripts. So once we push the change, everything should actually work as expected. Okay, so next we're going to create a volume for our backup scripts in a master STS file. Now we've got the master. Remember, we've got these two master file. Very important that we set up the volume for that backup script. If not, again, there won't be a way to understand what volume is assigned to that particular execution of the script. So we'll come in here and just edit under the specification. We'll edit the volume. We can add a new definition here. We're going to be doing for our backup. So give it a name. We'll call it the backup. Then within the backup, we'll set the config map for this. Now the config map for backup, oh, my bad. Uh, so we will create a config map. Okay, great. That works good. And the config map, we're going to actually set the default mode for the particular scripts. And I think we can actually call this give me a second, default mode. We'll just give this a permissions of 077. Then we will finally, I think that should be good to go. Definitely what we're doing is we create the volume backup, then the config map. It's actually set to default mode permission with 077. My bad. Then I think we can just give it a name, and the name will be backup. And that's the first thing we need to do here. Now, aside this, we also need to do one more thing. We need to go a bit lower and actually set up the path for this backup. If not, again, it's baseless. It's not going to make sense. We just carrying the volume is not sufficient. Okay, so next, we're going to configure the volume mount. We just created a volume. As you can see, the volume we had created, we have that for backup. I had also done for AWS and also for the Wazuh because I remember I created those folders. Then I set the permission for the backup specific to 077. Okay, 0777. So we go under the volume mounts and we need to create a volume mount for the backup. So below this, I'm just going to paste this. So you would see the backup, then I'm pointing to the mount paths, again, pointing to where that would be mounted on the var set backup. Then also set the sub path for this is actually daily backup.py, which is the script. Then for the monthly, we do the same and set the sub path as well. Okay, so once we have this done, we still have one more location where we need to make that change so we can actually have everything running as expected. Okay, so finally, we in our customization, we're going to also reflect the same change. Remember, I'd also done the same for AWS because I created the folder AWS with the credentials as well as the config. I've also done the same for the Wazuh because we also created the Wazuh. Okay, so since we're done with this in the master SCS, we go over to the customization. Then we have to actually create specifically. If we don't, we won't get this working. Within the customization file, we need to create config map generators for all these that we had just set up. For the backup, we do for the backup, we do for the Wazuh, also do for the AWS. So for the backup, we just need to create a config map generator called backup. Then we'll set up the specifications we want to have within the backup. So we can go to our config map generator here. I'm just going to tap down, then copy from my file source and just paste it in there to make it easy for me. So I'm doing for the monthly, the backup, just going to bring it in, paste it in here. So walking through it, you see the name is backup, and we'll point to where we're going to have those files in the Wazuh Manager backup for the daily backup and also for the monthly backup. Now we're going to do the same for the AWS and also for the Wazuh. We want to be sure we have those as well. Just gonna bring both of them at once to save me some time. Okay, copy this and paste this here. So I've got for the AWS and the files, actually the files which we created for the those files in here, config and credentials. Then for the Wazuh also, the Wazuh is actually in the Wazuh's directory which we had created in here. Okay, so we've got this last part done. It means it's all good. Now if we apply this change, definitely should be good to go. We should have everything working as expected. But we're not going to apply this change yet because we still want to make some more changes. Remember, we created this credential file in here. Just give me a second. Under secrets, this. So we also need to map this correctly under our resources. So I'm going to map that under resources so it knows how to actually fetch those credentials and use them when we need to use them. So I'm just going to do that under my bad. Go back to the customization under resources. I can add that under secrets. Okay. So I've got secrets, and I've mapped the secrets resource which I actually created within the secrets directory, which we have in here. Okay, at this point, it looks like we have it all good. I'm not going to apply this change yet because, like I mentioned, we still have a bunch of other stuffs to do. So we're going to, the next thing we're going to do, since we've done with the backup, we've done with the AWS script, and also for the Wazuh, we're going to go into other integrations. Maybe we'll start with GuardDT, CloudTrail, and those two first. Then once we get those done, we can push out change, then go into the cloud environment and set up the cloud environment with the S3 buckets with the name which we had defined within. Remember, we did define the name of the bucket in the, give me a second. I'm just going to go into the master conf, and we call the buckets uh, daily backup. So we're going to go create that bucket in our cloud environment and have the buckets pointing to in the right account where Wazuh should be able to actually use the credentials we configured to write the backup into that bucket. Okay, this is where I'm going to stop the recording for today. I know it's been a lot, but we'll be sharing every resources that I'm using, so it makes it easy for you to actually once we're done with this build, just have the entire code. It makes it easy for yourself as well. Okay, I'll be seeing you in the next recording, hopefully tomorrow, and we will build on what we had done so far and take it up from there. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.